Welcome to another episode of Going Green. I'm your host, Kathleen Harvey. We've suffered through one of the longest, coldest winters here on the East Coast in recent memory. But today, the spring bulbs are blooming, the birds are singing, and it's a beautiful sunny day. So it's time to clean out the garden and get ready for the coming growing season. So today's episode is all about spring cleaning. Let's get started. To get started, we have to gather materials that we'll need. Kneeling pad to protect your knees, pair of good pruners, pair of gloves, and a bag to put the pruning clippings in. Okay, so last fall, we protected our plants by putting shredded leaves around them. So now it's time to remove those leaves and to prune the dead stems back so that the new growth can emerge. So what we want to do is get started around the first plant. So the first thing I'm going to do is brush these leaves down and smooth them out. While I'm doing it, I notice there's a couple of weeds growing. So I'm just going to pull these and toss them in my trash can here so that as I pull the leaves down, I won't be leaving the weeds around. Springtime is one of the easiest times to do your weeding because the weeds are at their weakest point. The ground is soft and moist, and the weeds haven't had a chance to really get their roots too long yet. So pull your weeds as you uncover your plants here. Once you have them uncovered, I know this plant doesn't look very good, might even look like it's dead, but chances are very, very good that the roots survived the winter because I provided such a good cover of leaves last fall. So now what we want to do is take our pruners and get down close to the ground, but leave at least an inch and prune away the old dead growth. Now that I've pruned this one, I'm taking my prunings, putting them in the trash can, which will go out with the green trash to be composted by the township. We always want to remember to do that. Don't throw it in your regular trash, but compost it. As we continue to spread our leaves, we look for weeds. Now, I happen to know what most of the weeds look like. This is mugwort. It's a very common weed that grows in our area. It's sort of a vine, grows like crabgrass by spreading through underground rhizomes. It's very difficult to get rid of, so pull it as you go. But if you're not sure what new leaves are that are coming up, best to wait and leave it until you are sure. That way you don't accidentally pull something out that you planted and is just emerging from dormancy. We've all done that. This plant here is catnip, which is a perennial herb that I happen to grow for my cats, also known as catnip junkies. And it's coming up, it's just coming out of dormancy. So what I'm going to do is prune the dead tops out, but leave this nice new green growth. But since I know what this leaf looks like, I know it's not a weed, so I don't want to rip it out. See, there we go. But there are actually some weeds around it, which I don't want to strangle it and compete for nutrients in the soil. So I'm going to rip that out around it, leaving this nice healthy plant and putting some top dressing of shredded leaves around it to protect it. And the shredded leaves will continue to decompose, providing nutrients to the soil, helping to retain moisture in the soil. There we go. And acts a little bit as a weed deterrent. So let's move on to our next plant. Next up is this young palm that I planted last fall. Palms are not really native to this area, but I'm trying to push the outer boundaries of what will be able to grow up here. So I gave it extra protection last fall to see if I could get it to grow through the winter. So let's see how it did. First, I'm going to pull all of the leaves away. And we see that the exposed areas did get damaged, but underneath it is still green. So I'm going to just trim away the dead areas. There we go. And now the green area should be able to grow, and I'll keep an eye on this and continue to see how it's doing. Pulling weeds as I go. We see other things coming up. And one of the things that we have here, aha, it did make it through the winter. This is an elephant ear, also not really meant to be grown up in this cold temperature, but as you can see, it did make it through the winter. And here we have some lilies that are coming up. You see are emerging from dormancy. These are some irises coming up, also emerging from their dormancy, but I'm going to pull these little weeds that are starting in and around here to get rid of them and continuing to grow. So again, the objective is to spread it out, to now let the sun get down and really provide strength for the plants. Pull the weeds that might compete for the nutrients in the soil, which you don't want. And expose the bottoms of the plants so that the good plants can really continue to grow. I wanted to point out that last fall I put some newspapers down around my good plants before I put the leaves down. The point of that was to help to keep the soil temperature a little more even, and at the same time act as a weed block to reduce the amount of work I have to do now to pull the weeds out. So you see some of the remnants here. A lot of the newspaper has broken down, decomposed over time, but there's little shreds left. So I'm just going to pull this out, the shreds that are showing, pull the weeds that have started to grow around it, but you see there's not much coming up through it. So it really did do its job. So that's a good way of doing environmentally friendly weed control, is to reuse your old newspapers instead of putting herbicides down. This is a budlier bush, commonly known as a butterfly bush. It attracts butterflies, hence its common name. These are the dead flowers from last year. The best time to prune these is in early spring, just before it comes out of dormancy. A severe pruning will encourage lots of new growth, and you want to do that so that it puts on additional branches. It grows a lot year to year. So what we're going to do is take our pruners and we're going to cut back. If you can look closely here, you'll see some sections where tiny new leaves are starting. So I'm going to take it back to the spot that's right before the last growth. This one is a weak growth, so I'm going to take this one all the way off. This one's a more dominant growth, so I'm taking this back to cutting right above, maybe a ½ inch or so above the last leaf juncture. That way, when these come out of dormancy, they'll really branch back and they'll give us wonderful new growth. Now, as you're continuing to prune, you see how long these are. We want to get rid of all of this. This is all trash now. We can't do anything with it. So this goes in our trash bag. Now, as I step in to do some of the back branches, I want to be very careful because I have other things planted around the base. So, for example, I have some Trillium luteums. They're an endangered native wildflower that I purchased from a legal wildflower propagator, but I'm going to be careful to step where I don't step on them as I continue my pruning. So here I'm taking some of these weak stems off of the bottom because I want to get good strong growth coming up. So all of these weak little growths are going to come off. Some of them are actually even snapping off on their own because the horrible cold we had has killed them all the way back. And this is a good strong one, so I'm just taking that. See how much I'm taking off? It's a lot. But with budlieas, you want to take a lot off. These are not like other shrubs. These grow a lot each summer, so you want to do a pretty hard pruning on them. You don't do this with other shrubs, but budlieas are a little special that way. They need a good hard pruning early in the spring. So as I'm continuing to take these all the way back to the, again, a ½ an inch or so above the last leaf bud juncture, and you'll be able to see, here we go. Now, under a normal winter, what used to be normal for us, I would have done this probably a month ago, but because again we've had such a cold winter, many of our trees and shrubs are coming out of dormancy late. So you see the difference here. We now have some really tall branches that still need to be pruned, and we have our freshly pruned branches. By the end of the summer, these short ones will be at least as tall as these here. So you want to also prune them enough so that you'll get to enjoy the flowers as it continues to bloom all summer long, and it will attract butterflies all summer long. Late fall and early spring are the time to plant new trees and shrubs. So this is a magnolia macrophylla. It's a large-leaved magnolia that I planted about a week ago. It's good to plant them in early spring so that they get a chance to get their roots really solidly into the ground before the weather gets too hot. I added some soil amendments, in other words, some compost that I've been making all winter long to the soil as a soil amendment. It makes the soil a little lighter, a little fluffier, and a little more water retentive at the same time. In other words, it's a good way to help give the plant a good start. And I make sure that it gets at least an inch of rain every week. Springs tend to be a little bit on the wet side, so I don't necessarily need to water it every week. But just in case we have a dry spring, just wanted to mention that it needs to get an inch of water per week. So as you see here, these little green fuzzy things are called leaf buds. So these are where the new leaves will be coming out. And this nice little tree will focus on putting its roots down first, but then as spring advances, the leaves will start to grow and leaf out. Thanks for watching another episode of Going Green. I'm your host, Kathleen Harvey. If you have any questions or ideas for future shows, you can reach me at plantartisan@comcast.net. I hope to see you next time.